A Mafia boss gets in his car and hears a poor woman telling him, "Be quiet!" She's hiding in his backseat, trembling with a split lip and clutching a stolen drive. She witnessed something she was never meant to see, a murder by his rivals. When police surround them, he has a choice: kill her as a liability or use her as his ticket through the roadblock. He pulls her onto his lap, knife against her ribs, and pretends she's his girlfriend. Back at his penthouse, she discovers his secret. He's raising his orphaned niece alone. When assassins attack and he takes a bullet protecting her, she makes a decision that changes everything. What they don't realize yet is their tragedies are connected by the same enemy, the woman's sister and the Mafia boss's sister, both victims of the same dark conspiracy. When a $2 million bounty puts her life on the line, who can she really trust? And what happens when the most dangerous man in the city becomes the only one who can save her or destroy her? Through the raindrops streaming down the windshield, Dante steered the Bentley away from the police roadblock, his movements precise and controlled, despite the tension radiating through the car. Aria pressed herself lower into the leather seats, her heart hammering against her ribs as she clutched the USB drive. The familiar scent of hospital-grade disinfectant still clung to her uniform, a bitter reminder of how ordinary her night had started. Dante took a sharp turn down a narrow side street, the luxury car's engine purring quietly as they evaded detection. "If you're lying about any of this," he said, his voice carrying the chill of a winter storm, "you'll wish the Vitalis had found you first." Aria swallowed hard, tasting copper from her split lip. "I remember everything I see perfectly," she whispered, her words barely audible over the rain. "It's both a blessing and a curse. I can't forget a single detail of what happened tonight, even if I wanted to." The car sliced through puddles as Dante navigated the maze of warehouse district streets. Each turn took them further from the flashing lights, but Aria knew she was trading one danger for another. The leather seat beneath her still held traces of warmth from the heater, a stark contrast to the cold fear gripping her bones. "Start from the beginning," Dante commanded, his dark eyes meeting hers in the rearview mirror. Every detail. Aria closed her eyes, the images flooding back with crystal clarity. "I was cleaning the research wing like I do every Tuesday night. Dr. Harrison's office was my last stop." Her voice trembled but grew stronger as she continued. "I heard voices in the hall, angry whispers. I ducked behind the supply cart when 2 men in expensive suits walked past. They weren't hospital staff." Rain drummed against the roof as Dante guided the car deeper into the industrial sector. The streetlights grew fewer, casting long shadows across his sharp features. "The men who killed Harrison," he prompted. One was tall, with a scar along his jaw. The other had a gold ring with a lion's head. Aria's fingers twisted in the fabric of her uniform. They called each other Marco and Leo. They were angry because Harrison was threatening to expose something about medical trials, something about genetic manipulation. Dante's hands tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles still raw from his earlier violence. The Vitalis have been trying to expand beyond traditional operations, medical research, pharmaceuticals. "They shot him," Aria continued, her voice hollow. 2 bullets, point blank. I saw everything through the glass partition. When they left, I had to know what was worth killing for." Her hand clenched around the USB drive. "His computer was still logged in. I copied everything I could find about the trials." The car slowed as they approached a derelict warehouse complex. Rusted chain-link fences lined the perimeter, and broken windows gaped like missing teeth in the building's facade. "You took an enormous risk," Dante said, his tone unreadable. "I didn't have a choice." Aria met his gaze in the mirror again, defiance flickering through her fear. "My sister Emma was a nurse at Manhattan Memorial. 6 months ago, she disappeared after raising concerns about suspicious deaths in the research wing. The police said she probably just left town, but I knew." Her voice cracked. "I knew she'd never abandon me." Something shifted in Dante's expression, a microscopic change that most would miss, but Aria caught it. The ice in his eyes thawed for just a moment before freezing over again. He pulled the Bentley into a shadow-draped loading bay, killing the engine. "The Vitalis are planning something bigger than illegal medical trials," he said, turning to face her fully. "You said you overheard their plans against my family." Aria nodded, sitting up slowly. "They mentioned a shipment coming in next week. Something about using the hospital's research wing as cover for distribution. They're planning to frame the Salvatore family when it goes wrong." She hesitated. "They specifically mentioned making an example of someone named Sophia." The temperature in the car seemed to drop 10 degrees. Dante's expression turned lethal, and Arya instinctively pressed back against the seat. She'd seen that same cold fury in the research wing right before the Vitale men pulled their triggers. "Sophia is my niece," he said, each word precise as a knife blade. "She's 12 years old." The rain continued its steady rhythm against the car roof, filling the heavy silence. Arya thought of Emma, of all the times her sister had protected her when they were growing up, of how no one had been there to protect Emma in the end. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. Dante studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the darkness. The warehouse complex loomed around them like a steel cage, and Arya knew with absolute certainty that her life would never be the same after tonight. The police barricade loomed ahead, red and blue lights cutting through the rain. Dante's jaw tightened as he assessed the situation. 3 patrol cars, officers checking every vehicle with flashlights. "Get in the front, now!" he ordered, voice leaving no room for argument. Arya hesitated for only a second before climbing between the seats. Before she could settle into the passenger side, Dante's hand shot out, yanking her onto his lap. She gasped as something sharp pressed against her ribs, hidden beneath his jacket. "Listen carefully," he murmured against her ear, his breath warm on her skin. "You're my girlfriend. We had a passionate moment that got a little rough. One wrong word, and this knife finds a new home. Understood?" Arya nodded, her heart hammering. The knife pressed deeper, emphasizing his point. An officer approached, shining his flashlight through the driver's window. Dante lowered it smoothly, his free hand settling possessively on Arya's waist. "Evening, officer," he said, his tone perfectly pleasant. "Is there a problem?" The beam swept over them, lingering on Arya's hospital uniform and split lip. The officer's eyes narrowed. "We're investigating a disturbance. Mind explaining why the lady looks like she's been in a fight?" Dante chuckled, the sound rich and convincing. "An occupational hazard of backseat activities in a sports car. I'm afraid I got a bit carried away." His fingers squeezed Arya's hip in warning. "Darling, show the officer you're all right." The knife was a constant reminder against her side. Arya forced an embarrassed smile, channeling every ounce of acting ability she possessed. "I work nights at Manhattan Memorial," she explained, gesturing to her uniform. "James surprised me after my shift. Things got heated." "The lip?" the officer pressed. "Like I said," Dante smoothly interjected, "the Bentley's backseat isn't exactly spacious. An unfortunate collision with the door handle." He produced his wallet, extracting a business card. "James Morrison, Morrison Enterprises. Feel free to verify." The officer studied the card, then Arya's face again. She maintained her nervous smile, knowing the police wouldn't protect her from the Vitales. This devil, she knew, was currently her best chance at survival. After what felt like eternity, the officer nodded. "Drive carefully, Mr. Morrison, ma'am." He stepped back, waving them through. Dante waited until they were well past the roadblock before speaking. "Smart girl," he said, but didn't let her move from his lap. "Now, about that USB drive." "I'll tell you everything," Arya said, hyper-aware of his proximity. "But I need guarantees." "You're not in a position to negotiate." The knife withdrew, but his arm kept her firmly in place. "Though you've proven yourself useful enough to keep alive. For now." "The Vitales are experimenting on patients," she revealed, watching his reaction in the windshield's reflection. "The doctor I saw them kill. He was threatening to expose them. The USB has records, test results, names of victims." Her voice caught. "Including my sister Emma." Dante's expression remained neutral, but his posture shifted slightly. The nurse who disappeared. She noticed patients dying mysteriously, started asking questions. Arya's hands clenched in her lap. A week later, she was dead. The hospital claimed natural causes, but Emma was healthy, 25 years old. The Bentley turned into an underground garage beneath a towering luxury building. Dante finally allowed Arya to slide back into the passenger seat as they approached a private section cordoned off by a security gate. The garage door rolled shut behind them with finalizing certainty. "Out!" he commanded, leading her to a private elevator. As they ascended, Arya's mind raced, cataloging exits, angles, possibilities. The moment the doors opened, she bolted. She made it 3 steps before steel arms caught her, spinning her around and pinning her against the wall. Dante's face was inches from hers, his expression terrifyingly calm. "That was your first and last warning," he said softly. "Try to escape again, and I won't be so gentle." He kept a firm grip on her arm as he guided her into the penthouse. Arya's breath caught despite her fear. The space was stunning, all sleek lines and floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the glittering Manhattan skyline. Modern furniture, in cream and charcoal, created elegant contrast with abstract art and polished hardwood floors. In any other circumstance, it would have been beautiful. Now, it was just another prison. Dante entered a code into a keypad by the door, the lock engaging with an ominous click. "Welcome home, little mouse," he said, studying her with those cold eyes. "At least for as long as you're useful to me." Arya stood in the center of his opulent cage, rain streaming down the windows behind her like tears. The city lights sparkled beyond the glass, so close yet completely out of reach, much like her freedom. Morning sunlight filtered through heavy curtains, casting gentle shadows across Arya's tense form. She hadn't slept much, spending most of the night cataloging every detail of her gilded prison. The door opened without warning, and Dante strode in carrying a shopping bag. "Get dressed," he said, setting it down. "Everything should fit." Arya peered inside, finding designer clothes in exactly her size. "How did you—" "I have resources." His tone left no room for questions. "My tech specialist will examine the USB drive today. Until then, you'll remain here under surveillance." He moved closer, his presence filling the room. "You can access the main living area, kitchen, and your bathroom. Try to leave or contact anyone." His dark eyes held hers. "Well, let's just say you won't enjoy the consequences." After he left, Arya changed into the provided clothes, soft black leggings and an oversized cashmere sweater that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Through her door, she heard Dante speaking quietly in Italian before retreating to his office. She waited 30 minutes before beginning her careful exploration. The penthouse was massive, with soaring ceilings and modern artwork worth millions. Every window offered breathtaking views of Manhattan, but closer inspection revealed they were bulletproof and permanently sealed. The front door featured an elaborate biometric lock system. In the hallway outside, an armed guard maintained constant watch. Arya noticed they rotated shifts around noon, creating a brief window of vulnerability. When the moment came, she slipped to the security desk, while it was momentarily unattended, palming a keycard. Her heart pounding, she made it to the emergency stairwell before alarms shrieked to life. She managed 2 flights down before heavy footsteps echoed above her. Dante himself appeared, his expression murderous as he seized her arm. "That was foolish," he said, voice deadly quiet as he dragged her back upstairs. His grip was bruising but controlled, the restraint somehow more frightening than outright violence. "You're my prisoner, not my guest," he reminded her, shoving her into the guest room. "Since you can't behave, you'll stay here for the rest of the day." A guard appeared outside her door, weapon visible. Hours later, Dante allowed her to join him for dinner. Fine china and crystal sparkled under elegant lighting as his personal chef served perfectly cooked steaks. The wine was probably worth more than her car. "Tell me about your sister," he said suddenly. Arya set down her fork. "We raised ourselves after our parents died. I worked 3 jobs to put Emma through nursing school." Her throat tightened. "She was brilliant, compassionate. She deserved better than—" She stopped abruptly. "Than being murdered by the Vitales," Dante finished, studying her. Something flickered in his eyes. "I understand losing family to violence." The rest of dinner passed in tense silence. Later that night, Arya couldn't sleep. Using bobby pins she'd hidden in her hair, she worked on the lock until it clicked open. This time she made it to the private elevator before hidden sensors detected her. While searching for another exit, she heard a child's cry. Following the sound, she discovered a bedroom she hadn't noticed before, decorated in soft pinks and purples. Through the partially open door, she saw Dante sitting on a small bed, holding a crying girl about 6 years old. "The bad dreams again, Piccola?" he asked softly, stroking the child's dark hair. "I miss Mama," the girl whimpered. "I know, Sophia. I miss her too." Dante reached for a book on the nightstand. "How about your favorite story?" Arya watched, transfixed, as the dangerous man who'd threatened her life hours ago tenderly read "Good Night, Moon," doing different voices for each character until the child drifted back to sleep. He tucked the blankets around her with gentle hands, kissed her forehead, and whispered something in Italian. Backing away silently, Arya returned to her room, mind reeling from what she'd witnessed. She sat on the edge of her bed, trying to reconcile the ruthless crime boss with the loving uncle she'd just seen. Footsteps approached. Dante appeared in her doorway, his expression unreadable. "That's Sophia, my niece," he said quietly. "Her mother, my sister, was murdered last year. She lives with me now." Before Arya could respond, he stepped closer, voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "If you ever try to use her to escape or manipulate me, I'll make you beg for death." He turned to leave but paused. "The security system has been updated. There won't be a third escape attempt." The door closed with finality, leaving Arya alone with the unsettling knowledge that her captor was capable of both terrifying cruelty and surprising tenderness. The contradiction made him even more dangerous. The morning sun streamed through the penthouse windows as Arya entered the dining room. The massive table could seat 20, but only 3 places were set with fine china and crystal. Sophia sat at her usual spot, legs swinging as she colored in a notebook. "Good morning," the little girl chirped, looking up with bright eyes. Her dark curls were neatly braided, wearing a pristine private school uniform. Dante appeared from the kitchen, setting a plate of fresh fruit in front of Sophia. "Sophia, this is Arya. She'll be staying with us for a while." "Are you Uncle Dante's friend?" Sophia asked, offering Arya a gap-toothed smile. Before Arya could answer, Dante smoothly interjected, "Yes, she is. Now eat your breakfast, Piccola." The personal chef served Belgian waffles with fresh berries. Sophia dominated the conversation, eagerly showing Arya her science project, a carefully constructed model of the solar system. "Miss Thompson says mine's the best in class," Sophia declared proudly. "Uncle Dante helped me paint Jupiter's storms." Arya glanced at Dante, trying to imagine the dangerous crime boss carefully painting tiny swirls on a styrofoam ball. He caught her look and raised an eyebrow, daring her to comment. The peaceful domestic scene shattered when Marco arrived. The transition was immediate. Dante's gentle expression hardened into a mask of authority. His lieutenant stood at attention, radiating controlled menace. "Your car's ready, Principessa," Marco told Sophia, his stern face softening slightly. Sophia hugged Dante tightly. "Bye, Uncle Dante. Bye, Arya." She skipped out with her backpack and project, Marco following protectively. As soon as they left, Dante's tech specialist arrived, a nervous man with thick glasses who clutched a laptop. "We've partially decoded the drive, boss. It's concerning." They gathered in Dante's office. The specialist pulled up documents showing clinical trials conducted at Manhattan Memorial. Arya's stomach churned as she recognized some of the patient. Names, all from the poverty-stricken neighborhoods she grew up in. They were testing experimental treatments without consent, she whispered, remembering her sister Emma's mysterious decline. Those bastards used people like lab rats. "The Vitalis control several pharmaceutical companies," Dante explained, his jaw tight. "We've suspected illegal research, but never had proof." His phone buzzed. Marco's voice came through the speaker, tense and urgent. "Boss, they've put out a bounty. $2 million for the cleaning woman. Her hospital ID photo is everywhere." Arya's blood ran cold as Dante pulled up the announcement on his laptop. The photo showed her in her hospital uniform, details about her work schedule and usual routes included. "Only someone inside the hospital could know this," Dante growled. "Marco, double the security detail. No one in or out without my direct approval." He guided Arya through the penthouse with a hand at her lower back, hyper-aware of every shadow. "You're being hunted by every criminal and mercenary in New York," he said grimly. "Even if you escaped me, where would you go?" The reality hit her hard. She had no family left, no close friends, no resources. The Vitalis would find her anywhere she ran. That evening, Dante and Marco reviewed security footage in his office. Arya was in her room reading when the door opened. She expected Dante, but instead saw James, one of the security guards. Before she could scream, he grabbed her, twisting her wrist painfully as he pressed a cloth over her mouth. "Nothing personal," he muttered, reaching for a syringe. "But $2 million is $2 million. A shadow filled the doorway. James froze as Dante stepped into the room, his expression terrifyingly calm. The gun appeared in his hand like magic. "Boss, I can explain," James started. The single shot was deafening in the enclosed space. James crumpled, a neat hole in his forehead, his grip on Arya's wrist releasing as he fell. Dante holstered his weapon and turned to her. His cold mask slipped as he noticed her cradling her injured wrist. Wordlessly, he led her to the kitchen, sitting her at the marble island while he gathered first aid supplies. His touch was surprisingly gentle as he examined her wrist, applying ice and carefully wrapping an elastic bandage. His fingers traced her pulse point, lingering longer than necessary. "No one touches what's mine," he said softly, the possessive words sending a shiver down her spine. Their eyes met, electricity crackling in the space between them. "You're safer with me than anywhere else in this city right now," he added, still holding her wrist. Do you understand that yet? Arya nodded slowly, the truth settling heavy in her chest. There was no escape from Dante's world now, and what frightened her most was realizing she wasn't sure she wanted one anymore. The alarms pierced the silence, jolting Arya from sleep. Her heart hammered as Dante burst through her bedroom door, gun drawn, and, muscles tense, the dim emergency lights cast harsh shadows across his face. "The security system's been breached. We need to move." His voice was low and urgent as he reached into his jacket, producing a smaller handgun. "Do you know how to use this?" Arya shook her head, fingers trembling as he pressed the weapon into her hands. The metal felt cold and foreign against her palm. "Safety here," he demonstrated quickly, hands covering hers. "Point and squeeze, only as a last resort." His intense gaze held hers. "Stay close to me." They moved silently through the darkened penthouse, Dante leading with his weapon ready. The usual opulence felt menacing in the emergency lighting. Every shadow could hide a killer. "Only a Vitali specialist could have gotten through my security," Dante whispered as they crept forward. "They've been planning this," his jaw clenched. "Marco has Sophia in the panic room. We're almost there." A flash of movement was their only warning. The assassin emerged from behind an expensive sculpture, his silenced weapon spitting death. Dante shoved Arya behind a marble column as bullets chipped away at the stone. The firefight erupted in controlled bursts, both men taking calculated shots. Arya pressed herself against the column, the gun shaking in her grip. The acrid smell of gunpowder filled the air. Dante shifted to return fire, and a bullet caught him in the side. He grunted but kept shooting, his precise shots finding their mark. The assassin crumpled, but Dante's attention was already on the security feed displayed on a wall panel. More figures moved through the building's corridors. "They've blocked our route to the panic room," he growled, pressing a hand to his bleeding side. The dark stain spread across his white shirt. Arya's mind raced, drawing on countless hours spent cleaning luxury buildings. Every high-rise had its skeleton of service areas, the hidden infrastructure that kept them running. "There's another way," she said urgently. "Every building this size has maintenance passages, service elevators. They won't know about them." Dante studied her face, clearly weighing his options as blood seeped between his fingers. Finally, he nodded. "Lead the way." She guided them through a concealed door, into the building's utilitarian backbone. The service elevator was cramped, meant for cleaning carts and maintenance equipment. Dante leaned heavily against the wall as they descended, his breathing labored. The elevator shuddered to a stop between floors, emergency lights flickering. Arya's heart leaped into her throat. Through the gap in the doors, she could see enough space to squeeze through to the floor below. She could leave him here, weakened and trapped. The thought barely formed before she dismissed it. The elevator hummed back to life, continuing its descent to the maintenance level. She wrapped an arm around Dante's waist, supporting his weight as they stepped out. "You could have left me," he said through gritted teeth, blood loss making him pale. "Not yet." She tightened her grip, helping him navigate the maze of pipes and electrical panels. "You're my best chance of surviving this, and I'm yours right now." The maintenance exit led to a narrow alley where a nondescript black sedan waited. Arya helped Dante into the passenger seat, his usually immaculate suit now soaked with blood. He pressed the keys into her palm, his blood making them slick. "Can you drive?" His voice was strained but steady. "Our lives depend on it." "Yes." Arya climbed behind the wheel, adjusting the seat. "Where are we going?" Dante gave her an address, adding, "It's a safe house. Only 3 people know it exists." He pressed harder against his wound. "Head north. Take side streets. They'll be watching the main roads." As Arya started the engine, she felt the weight of her choice settle over her. Every turn of the wheel took her further from her old life and deeper into Dante's dangerous world. She'd chosen to save him, to trust him, and there was no going back. The city streets stretched before them, dark and uncertain. Dante's labored breathing filled the car as she navigated through the shadows, both of them knowing that sunrise would find them irreversibly bound together, the Mafia boss and his former captive, now united against a common enemy. Dawn painted the sky in muted colors as Arya guided the car through winding roads outside the city. Her knuckles were white on the steering wheel, constantly checking the rearview mirror for pursuers. Beside her, Dante drifted in and out of consciousness, his normally commanding presence diminished by blood loss. "Left at the next fork," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. "Through the trees. Follow the gravel path." The safe house appeared through the morning mist, a substantial log cabin nestled against a peaceful lake. Under different circumstances, it might have seemed idyllic. Now it represented their only chance at survival. Getting Dante inside proved challenging. His tall frame leaned heavily against her as they stumbled through the door. The interior was surprisingly well appointed, rustic but comfortable, with modern amenities carefully disguised to maintain the cabin's modest appearance. "First aid kit," Dante directed through gritted teeth. "Behind the painting in the bedroom." His skin had taken on an alarming pallor. Arya found the hidden medical supplies, far more extensive than a typical first aid kit. Under Dante's increasingly weak instruction, she laid out what she needed: forceps, surgical thread, antiseptic, gauze. "Have you done this before?" she asked, hands trembling as she cut away his blood-soaked shirt. "Not from this end," he managed a weak smile. "The bullet needs to come out. I'll talk you through it." The next hour tested every ounce of Arya's resolve. Dante coached her through the procedure, his jaw clenched against the pain as she extracted the bullet. Her hands grew steadier as she worked, focusing on each precise movement. The intimacy of the situation struck her. This man who had held her at gunpoint now trusted her to save his life. "Good," he whispered as she finished the last stitch. "You would have made a decent surgeon." The ghost of a smile crossed her face. "I'll stick to cleaning, thanks." She helped him lie back, noticing how his muscles tensed beneath her touch. While Dante slept, Arya explored their sanctuary. The cabin was a study in paranoid preparation. The pantry held enough supplies for months. Every window had reinforced glass and multiple locks. She found no phones, no internet connection, not even a radio. The nearest building she could see was miles across the lake. Trading one prison for another, she thought, but at least this one kept the killers out. Evening shadows lengthened across the floor when Dante finally stirred. Fever brightened his eyes, but his mind was clear as Arya helped him sit up. "No one knows about this place," he said, watching her check his bandages. "Not Marco, not even my closest advisors. After Elena, my sister, was killed, I needed somewhere completely off the grid." "The Vitalis killed her?" Arya asked softly, applying fresh gauze to his wound. "Made it look like a carjacking gone wrong." His voice hardened. "Elena was a research physician. She discovered something in their pharmaceutical trials. Something big enough that they silenced her immediately." Understanding dawned on Arya's face. "Like what they were doing at Manhattan Memorial." Dante nodded grimly. "I've spent the last year gathering evidence, planning how to destroy them. Elena left behind notebooks, research files." His voice trailed off as fever took hold again. Through the night, Arya tended to him as his temperature climbed. She bathed his forehead with cool cloths, changed sweat-soaked sheets, and monitored his wound for infection. During the worst moments, he called out for Elena. "I'm sorry," he murmured, caught in delirium. "Should have protected you. Won't let them hurt Sophia. Promised to keep her safe." Arya's heart ached at the raw pain in his voice. This wasn't the calculated crime boss who had threatened her life. This was a brother haunted by failure, an uncle desperate to protect his niece. Near dawn, his fever finally broke. Exhaustion caught up with Arya, and she dozed off in the bedside chair, one hand resting near his on the covers. Sunlight was just beginning to filter through the trees when Dante woke. He studied her sleeping face, noting the dark circles under her eyes, the way she had stayed close even when his vulnerability would have made escape easy. Something shifted in his chest, an unfamiliar warmth that had nothing to do with fever. Arya stirred, blinking slowly awake. Their eyes met in the gentle morning light, the air between them charged with unspoken understanding. "Why didn't you leave when you had the chance?" His voice was soft, curious rather, than accusatory. "Because I remembered Sophia," she answered truthfully. "And because out there alone, I'd just be running until they caught me." She paused, weighing her next words. "At least with you, I stand a chance." Dante's hand moved to cover hers, the touch lacking any trace of threat or coercion. "We stand a chance," he corrected gently. "Together." They sat in silence, neither willing to break this fragile new connection, both aware that something fundamental had changed between them. The days at the cabin fell into an unexpected rhythm. Each morning, Arya changed Dante's bandages with increasingly steady hands, their silence comfortable rather than tense. His wound was healing well, though he still winced when moving too quickly. During these moments of forced intimacy, she couldn't help noticing the scars that marked his body, each one telling a story of survival. They spent afternoons strategizing, Dante teaching her about the Vidali organization's structure, while she shared everything she'd observed during her months at the hospital. He was surprised by her quick grasp of complex criminal hierarchies, the way she could connect seemingly unrelated details. Evenings brought a strange domesticity. Arya discovered the cabin's kitchen was well-stocked, and cooking gave her something to focus on besides the precarious situation. Dante would watch her from the small dining table, asking occasional questions about her life before all this. She told him about growing up poor, about working multiple jobs to put her sister through nursing school. He shared carefully selected stories about raising Sophia, pride evident in his voice when describing his niece's accomplishments. These glimpses of normalcy made it easy to forget who they really were: captor and captive, criminal and witness. On the fourth morning, over coffee that had become their shared ritual, Arya broached the subject that had been nagging at her. The USB drive. Was everything lost in the attack? No, Dante replied, studying her over the rim of his cup. I had the contents uploaded to a secure server before they breached the penthouse. He retrieved a tablet from his bag, showing her partially decrypted files. My tech team managed this much before everything went sideways. Patient records, mostly. All in code. Arya leaned closer, scanning the documents. These trial numbers match what I saw in Dr. Chen's office before. She rattled off a series of complex identification codes. Dante's expression sharpened. He pulled up a random page of numbers, showed it to her for 3 seconds, then switched it off. What were the last 4 sequences? Without hesitation, Arya recited them perfectly. A slow smile spread across Dante's face, one that held equal parts admiration and calculation. Eidetic memory, he said softly. You've memorized everything from that drive. I remember everything I see, she admitted. It's just how my brain works, always has. That explains how you picked up our security patterns so quickly. He set the tablet aside. You're even more valuable than I thought, to both sides. The afternoon sun was casting long shadows when Arya heard the engine. She dropped the firewood she'd gathered and rushed inside. Someone's coming! Dante was already moving, slower than usual but armed. He positioned himself near the window, then relaxed slightly. That's Marco's car. I know the sound. Still, they waited tensely as footsteps approached. Marco entered alone, his expression grave. Sophia's secure, he reported immediately. But we have problems. The news he brought cast a pall over the cabin. Several of Dante's captains believed Arya had compromised him, that his judgment was impaired by her presence. They wanted her eliminated, cleanly, quietly, for the good of the organization. After receiving strict orders to maintain the fiction that both Dante and Arya died in the penthouse attack, Marco left as night fell. His departure felt ominous. He'll be back, Dante said once they were alone. With others, the organization won't accept the risk you represent. They spent the next hours preparing. Arya helped Dante move furniture to create defensive positions, noting how he struggled to hide his pain. They gathered makeshift weapons, anything that could give them an advantage. Just after midnight, the distinctive crunch of tires on gravel broke the silence. Dante moved to position himself near the door, grimacing as the motion pulled at his stitches. Stay hidden, he ordered. Arya grabbed his arm. I'm not leaving you to fight alone. The determination in her voice matched the steel in her spine. Their eyes met in the darkness, something electric passing between them. Before she could process what was happening, Dante pulled her against him. His kiss was fierce, possessive, full of promises and dangers. She responded with equal intensity, pouring all her confused emotions into that single moment of connection. The sound of footsteps on the porch forced them apart. If we survive this, Dante whispered against her lips, we're finishing what we just started. Arya's heart raced from both fear and desire as she nodded. They took their positions on either side of the door, weapons ready, united in their determination to face whatever came through it together. The cabin door exploded inward, wood splintering as Marco led 3 armed men inside. Moonlight glinted off their weapons as they spread out, searching for targets. Dante moved first, despite his injury, launching himself at the nearest captain with devastating precision. His elbow caught the man's throat, sending him stumbling backward as gunfire erupted. Arya ducked behind an overturned table, her heart hammering. She watched in horrified fascination as Dante fought with lethal grace. Even wounded, he was terrifying, a predator among predators. He disarmed one captain with a brutal twist, using the man's own weapon to shoot him in the knee. Marco fired, forcing Dante to dive for cover. The bullet splintered wood where his head had been seconds before. Arya's eyes darted around the cabin, spotting the cast iron pan she'd left soaking in the sink. While the men focused on Dante, she crept along the shadows. This isn't personal, boss, Marco called out. The woman's a liability. The organization comes first. The organization is mine, Dante snarled back, his voice deadly calm despite the chaos. Your betrayal makes this very personal. Arya reached the sink, fingers closing around the heavy pan handle. Marco was closest, his back exposed as he tried to flank Dante's position. She swung with all her strength, connecting with his shoulder. The impact sent shockwaves up her arms, but Marco stumbled, his shot going wide. Dante seized the opportunity, surging forward to engage Marco directly. Their fight was brutal, intimate, two men who'd worked together for years trying to kill each other. Marco landed a punch to Dante's injured side, drawing a pained grunt, but Dante countered with an uppercut that snapped Marco's head back, following through with a knife that appeared from nowhere. The blade found Marco's heart with surgical precision. His eyes widened in surprise before he crumpled. Dante didn't waste time watching him fall, already turning to face the remaining threats. One captain lay bleeding from his knee, weapon kicked away. Another was unconscious from Dante's initial assault. The third stood frozen, weapon lowered, as he processed how quickly the odds had turned. Drop it, Dante ordered. His voice carries absolute authority despite his labored breathing. Or join them. The captain's gun clattered to the floor. We thought she was compromising your judgment, he stammered. She has an eidetic memory, Dante replied coldly. Everything on that drive, every detail about the Vitale operation, it's all in her head. She's not a liability, she's an asset. One under my personal protection. His eyes narrowed. Spread the word. Anyone who threatens her answers directly to me. The surviving captains left quickly, dragging their wounded companion. They had orders to shore up loyalty within the organization and eliminate any further dissent. As the sound of their vehicles faded, Dante's composure cracked. He stumbled, pressing a hand to his side, where fresh blood stained his shirt. Your stitches! Arya gasped, rushing to support him. She helped him to a chair, quickly gathering the medical supplies. Her fingers trembled slightly as she lifted his shirt, revealing the torn stitches and angry flesh beneath. Worth it, Dante murmured, watching her work. The adrenaline and tension that had been building between them crackled in the small space. When her fingers brushed his bare skin, he caught her wrist gently. Their eyes met, and something snapped. Dante pulled her into his lap, claiming her mouth with desperate hunger. Arya matched his intensity, fingers tangling in his hair as years of control and caution burned away in the heat between them. He stood, lifting her effortlessly despite his injury. Their first coupling was urgent, primal, clothes hastily discarded as they stumbled toward the bedroom. But when he laid her on the bed, Dante's touch turned surprisingly gentle. He explored her body with reverent attention, drawing soft gasps and pleading whimpers. Arya arched beneath him, nails scoring his back as passion built between them. When he finally joined them together, it was with exquisite slowness that made them both tremble. Their rhythm built gradually, tender yet fierce, until pleasure crashed over them in waves. Dawn found them still entwined, the dynamic between them irrevocably altered. They were no longer captor and captive, but equals united by shared purpose and growing affection. Over coffee, they began piecing together the puzzle of the Vitale operation. A message from Dante's loyal captain brought crucial information. The murdered doctor had been conducting unauthorized experiments on vulnerable patients, those without families to ask questions. As evening approached, they sat surrounded by files and notes connecting threads of conspiracy. Emma Costello, Arya said softly, reading a patient name. She felt Dante go still beside her. He reached for his sister's journal, flipping pages until he found what he sought. There was Emma's name, written in his sister's elegant hand, among a list of patients flagged for investigation. The doctor who died was treating your sister, Dante said quietly, showing Arya the journal. And my sister was investigating him before the Vitales killed her. Understanding dawned as their personal tragedies aligned through the same Vitale operation. Arya's fingers found Dante's across the scattered papers, their shared loss and hunger for justice creating something unbreakable between them. They took someone from both of us, she said, voice steady with determination. Now we make them pay. Together. Dante raised their joined hands to his lips, sealing their alliance in vengeance and deepening affection. The morning sun filtered through the cabin's windows as Dante and Arya sat at the kitchen table, papers spread before them. Her perfect recall proved invaluable as she recited strings of data, patient numbers, and trial protocols from the USB drive. Dante recorded everything methodically, his precise handwriting filling notebook pages. Here, Arya said, pointing to a sequence of dates. These match the timeline in your sister's journal. She was tracking a pattern of deaths labeled as complications from pre-existing conditions. Dante's jaw tightened as he compared the entries. The Vitales covered their tracks well. Each death appeared unrelated, spread across different hospitals and clinics. They worked through the morning, breaking only when Dante insisted Arya eat something. As they shared a simple lunch, he grew quiet, lost in thought. "I was 19 when they killed my father," he said suddenly, staring into his coffee. "Shot while leaving a restaurant. I wasn't ready to take over, but weakness meant death in our world." Arya reached across the table, covering his hand with hers. "How did you manage?" "I became what I needed to be. Cold, calculated. I learned to use fear because respect takes too long to earn." His fingers intertwined with hers. "But Sophia, she reminds me of who I used to be. Sometimes I wonder if I'm poisoning her just by being in her life." "You're protecting her," Arya said softly. "Like I tried to protect Emma." She told him about the years after their mother died, working as a waitress during days and cleaning offices at night. How she'd stretched every dollar to keep Emma in nursing school, proud when her sister graduated with honors. "She was so idealistic," Arya's voice cracked. "She wanted to help people who couldn't afford proper care. That's why she took the position at Manhattan Memorial. I never imagined—" "They prey on people like Emma," Dante said, anger edging his words. "People with compassion. People who trust the system." They returned to their work, methodically mapping connections between shell companies, clinic locations, and key Vital personnel. Arya's memory yielded more details with each review: security codes, employee names, delivery schedules. Late afternoon brought a secured call from Dante's tech specialist. The news was grim. The Vitales were eliminating loose ends, including 3 nurses who had worked in the trial program. "They're accelerating their timeline," Dante said after ending the call. The specialist identified 3 crucial locations: the private clinic, research lab, and data center. Each one holds pieces of evidence we need. Evening settled over the lake as they refined their findings. The experimental drug trials had been designed to fast-track FDA approval for new pharmaceuticals, cutting corners by testing on patients unlikely to have advocates investigating adverse reactions. When they finally stopped working, Arya stepped onto the porch, needing fresh air after hours of intense focus. The lake stretched dark and peaceful before her, stars reflecting on its surface like scattered diamonds. She heard Dante's quiet footsteps behind her, felt the solid warmth of him as he stood close. The autumn air carried a chill, but she didn't feel cold with him near. "I used to dream about having enough power to protect the people I love," she admitted softly, still gazing at the stars. "Even when you terrified me, I recognized that power in you. It drew me somehow." Dante turned her gently to face him, his usual mask of control softened by something she'd never seen before. "And what draws you now?" His voice was rough with emotion. Arya reached up, tracing the scar that ran along his jaw. She wasn't afraid of the predator anymore. She'd seen too much of the man beneath. "The way you look at me," she answered honestly. "Like I'm the only thing that matters. The way you let me see your vulnerability when you could have stayed cold." When he kissed her, it was different from their previous encounters. This wasn't about passion or power or possession. It was slower, deeper, filled with an emotion neither of them was ready to name, but both could feel. They parted slowly, Dante resting his forehead against hers. "Tomorrow we start taking down the Vitales," he promised softly. "But tonight you're all that matters to me." He led her back inside to the warmth of the cabin. Their coming together that night felt like finding sanctuary rather than surrendering to captivity. The autumn sun cast long shadows as Dante and Arya packed their weapons and supplies into the Bentley. A week of healing and planning had transformed their dynamic. Touches lingered, glances held meaning beyond strategy. The cabin had become their sanctuary. But now duty called them back to the dangerous reality of New York City. Arya checked the clip of her handgun, movements now confident after days of Dante's patient instruction. "I still think we should hit the data center first," she said, sliding the weapon into her holster. "The files there will prove the connection between the Vitales and the pharmaceutical trials." "We hit all 3 simultaneously," Dante replied, his recovered strength evident in his fluid movements as he loaded gear into the trunk. "The clinic, lab, and data center. No chance for them to destroy evidence or move assets." He paused, studying her face. "You don't have to be part of this." "My sister died because of their experiments," Arya said firmly. "I need to see this through." the drive back to the city filled with tactical discussion. Dante detailed how his organization would split into 3 teams, each targeting a crucial facility. His voice held pride when he described his men's capabilities, but Arya caught the underlying tension. Not everyone approved of her role in the operation. The data center will be the most heavily guarded, he explained, hands tight on the steering wheel. That's why I'm leading that team personally. And why I need to be there, Arya insisted. I memorized those files. I'll know exactly what to look for, what could be hidden in seemingly innocent data. Dante's jaw clenched, but he nodded. The past week had taught him to respect her capabilities alongside his growing feelings for her. They arrived at a historic brownstone in an upscale neighborhood. Inside, Sophia's delighted shriek echoed through the halls as she launched herself into Dante's arms. Uncle Dante, you were gone forever! Arya watched their reunion, heart warming at how naturally Dante transformed with his niece. The feared Mafia boss became simply a loving uncle, spinning Sophia around and listening intently to her excited chatter about the books she'd read while he was away. Sophia turned to Arya with innocent curiosity. Are you Uncle, Dante's girlfriend? Marco said you were special. Before either adult could respond, Sophia hugged Arya's legs. I'm glad you're here. Uncle Dante looks happier. While Sophia napped later, Dante's captains gathered in the wood-paneled study. Maps spread across an antique desk as they finalized timing for the coordinated strikes. Arya noticed the sideways glances, the subtle shifting away when she approached. Not everyone had accepted her transition from hostage to partner. She excused herself to check on Sophia, needing a break from the testosterone-heavy planning session. As she passed the kitchen, hushed voices caught her attention. Boss is thinking long-term, one lieutenant muttered. Once we have the formula, our labs can refine it. Clean it up, make it safer. Still experimental drugs, another replied, but better us controlling it than the Vitalis. Think of the profit margins once we perfect the process. Arya's blood ran cold. The same research that killed Emma, Dante planned to continue it. She pressed against the wall, heart pounding, as the lieutenants moved away. Upstairs, her hands shook as she packed a small bag. Everything she'd begun to believe about Dante, about their connection, felt hollow. She'd thought his desire for vengeance came from justice, not opportunity. The door opened behind her. She didn't need to turn to know it was Dante. His presence filled any room he entered. You're planning to leave. His voice held no question, only certainty. Arya faced him, anger warring with heartbreak. Were you ever going to tell me about your plans for the drug research? His expression hardened into the mask she hadn't seen since their early days. You don't understand the world I operate in. Sometimes survival requires difficult decisions. Difficult decisions? Arya's voice cracked. That research killed my sister, killed your sister, and you want to continue it? Everything between us has been real, Dante insisted, stepping closer. But my world isn't black and white, Arya. The formula exists. Better it be controlled by someone who understands its dangers. I thought you were different, she whispered, tears threatening. I thought what we had... Arya... His reach for her was gentle despite his hardened expression. Trust what you've learned about me this past week. Sophia's voice called from down the hall. Uncle Dante, I had a bad dream. He hesitated, torn between them. We need to finish this discussion. Yes, we do, Arya agreed softly. The moment he left, she moved swiftly to the window. Her theatrical escape attempts at the penthouse had taught her well. This time she moved silently and efficiently. By the time Dante returned, the room was empty, except for the lingering scent of her perfume and the ghost of what might have been. Dawn painted the Manhattan skyline in muted gold as Arya hurried through the waking city, her heart pounding with every passing car. She ditched her phone, knowing Dante could track it, and withdrawn cash from an ATM before destroying her cards. Every skill she'd learned about avoiding surveillance during her week with Dante now served to hide from him. The address she'd memorized led to a modest apartment building in Chelsea. Jamie Carlisle's byline had caught her attention during their research. His series on pharmaceutical companies testing drugs in developing countries had won awards. His recent articles on corporate whistleblowers suggested he could help expose the truth. Arya pressed his buzzer, rehearsing her pitch. The voice that answered was cautious but professional. Yes, Mr. Carlisle, I have evidence of illegal medical experimentation on vulnerable patients in New York hospitals. People are dying to keep this quiet. A pause then. Come up. Jamie's apartment was cluttered but organized, walls lined with journalism awards and framed front pages. He was younger than she expected, maybe mid-30s, with earnest eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Start from the beginning," he said, recording device ready. "Leave out nothing." Arya carefully explained about the experimental treatments, the deaths disguised as complications, her sister Emma's suspicious decline. She detailed the murder she witnessed and the USB drive's contents, while omitting any mention of Dante or the Salvatores. "The Vitali family is behind it all," she finished. "They're killing anyone who might expose them." Jamie's skepticism had transformed to intense interest. "This is exactly the kind of corporate corruption I investigate. With your testimony and my media connections, we can blow this wide open." Meanwhile, across town, Dante's rage at discovering Arya's empty room quickly turned to fear when his security teams reported no sign of her on any cameras. She'd learned too well from him how to disappear. "Find her," he snarled at his captains. "Now!" When questioning revealed the conversation she'd overheard about the drug formula, Dante's fury found new targets. He slammed one lieutenant against the wall. "You discussed unauthorized plans where she could hear, after everything she's been through?" "Boss, we thought—" "You didn't think," Dante cut him off. "Now she's out there alone, believing we're no better than the Vitalis." Back in Jamie's apartment, Arya recited details from the encrypted files as he typed rapidly, building his story. Her photographic memory provided exact dates, names, and drug trial data that painted a damning picture of systematic exploitation. "This is incredible," Jamie murmured, fingers flying over his keyboard. "Let me make a quick call to my editor." When he stepped into his bedroom to make the call, Arya's eyes wandered the apartment, taking in details she'd missed earlier. A photo caught her attention, partially hidden behind others on a crowded shelf. She moved closer, stomach dropping. The image showed Jamie at what appeared to be a charity gala, smiling beside a man she recognized from Dante's intelligence files. Vincent Vitale, the family's heir. Another photo beneath it showed Jamie receiving an award from a pharmaceutical company's CEO they'd identified as a Vitale front. Cold realization washed over her. She'd walked straight into a trap. The bedroom door opened. Jamie returned with two men in expensive suits, their hard eyes and concealed weapons marking them as Vitale soldiers. "You really should have checked my recent articles," Jamie said, his earnest demeanor replaced by smug satisfaction. "I've been on the Vitale payroll for years. Amazing what people will tell a crusading journalist they think they can trust." As the men grabbed her arms, Arya's mind raced uselessly. She'd fled from Dante's protection based on a misunderstanding, delivering herself and all her memorized evidence directly to the enemy. Jamie made a call, his tone casual. "Mr. Vitale, we have the girl. Yes, she remembers everything." He listened, smile widening. "A public execution? Bold, but effective. It should certainly draw out Salvatore." He ended the call and turned to Arya. "Your death is going to be quite the media event, a warning to anyone who crosses the Vitale family and bait for your Mafia boyfriend." She struggled as one enforcer prepared a syringe while the other held her still. The needle slid into her arm, and heaviness immediately spread through her limbs. Through darkening vision, she watched the third man set up a camera on a tripod, adjusting it to frame her slumping form. "Smile for your boyfriend," he taunted. "He'll be watching this broadcast very soon." As consciousness faded, Arya's thoughts turned to Dante. She'd run from the one man truly capable of protecting her, based on fragments of an overheard conversation she hadn't understood. Now she'd never know if what they'd built together had been real. The sedative pulled her under as the camera's red light blinked on, recording her vulnerability for an audience she dreaded to imagine. Through a fog of sedatives, Arya's consciousness returned slowly. Cold concrete pressed against her cheek as she blinked away the drug-induced haze, taking in her surroundings. The room was large and windowless, transformed into an impromptu studio with professional lighting equipment and multiple camera setups aimed at a metal chair bolted to the floor. Luciano Vitale stood watching her, his silver hair and tailored suit a stark contrast to the industrial setting. Despite his advanced age, power radiated from his stance. His son Carlo lounged against the wall, playing with a knife, while several armed guards maintained positions by the doors. "Miss Costello," Luciano addressed her with unsettling politeness. "I apologize for the crude accommodations. Please understand, this is simply business." He gestured to the chair. "You'll be helping us deliver an important message about the consequences of interfering with Vitale family matters." Two guards lifted Arya roughly into the chair as Luciano, continued his cordial monologue. Your execution will be broadcast live to our associates throughout the criminal underground. But more importantly, Dante Salvatore will have a front row seat to watch his weakness be eliminated. Carlo pushed off from the wall, grinning. We've taken care of all the other loose ends. Every doctor, nurse, and paper pusher who knew about the program. You're the last one. He traced his knife along Aria's jaw. And you're going to help us destroy Salvatore in the process. Across the city, Dante's penthouse had transformed into a war room. Maps, surveillance feeds, and computer screens covered every surface as his organization mobilized to find Aria. His expression was carved from stone as reports came in. No trace of her on cameras, no witnesses, nothing. Boss, one of his hackers called out. Intercepted Vitale communication. They're planning some kind of broadcast tonight. Dante's jaw clenched. When? Midnight. They're sending invitations to all the major families. Without hesitation, Dante began issuing orders. Move up the timeline. Hit all 3 locations simultaneously, now! I'm leading the compound assault myself. His captains protested, arguing he should coordinate from safety, but Dante's expression silenced them. She's there because of me. I'm getting her out. In the concrete room, Aria fought to keep her mind clear as the interrogation began. Carlo demanded every detail she remembered from the files while cameras recorded. She fed them a careful mix of truth and fabrication, watching their reactions to gauge what they already knew. The trial records showed 63 deaths classified as complications, she recited, altered slightly from the actual 78. Dr. Matthews supervised the experimental protocol. A real name, but connected to false details. When they cross-referenced her information and found discrepancies, Carlo's face contorted with rage. He backhanded her hard enough to snap her head back. Stop playing games! Throughout the brutal questioning, Aria forced herself to stay observant. She counted guards, noted door locations, tracked the timing of shift changes. Every detail could matter for survival. As night fell, activity in the compound increased. Technical crews adjusted lighting and camera equipment while Carlo paced impatiently, checking his phone. Almost showtime, he announced, showing Aria the screen. It displayed a message being sent to criminal organizations across the city, including a special invitation for Dante containing the compound's location. He'll come running to save you and walk right into our trap. You're underestimating him, Aria said through split lips. Carlo laughed. No, you overestimated him. Love makes people stupid and predictable. When Carlo left to oversee final preparations, one young guard remained watching Aria. She studied him carefully. His discomfort was subtle, but visible, in the way he shifted his weight, avoided looking directly at the blood on her face. Taking a desperate chance, Aria reached for the small locket she'd managed to keep hidden. They killed my sister, she whispered, showing him Emma's photo through the glass. She was a nurse. They used her for experiments and disposed of her like garbage. The guard's expression flickered as he glanced at the smiling girl in the picture. His eyes darted to the door, then back to Aria. I had a sister too, he said, voice barely audible. He moved closer, pretending to check her restraints. Northeast Corridor has the lightest security. If something happened, that's where I wouldn't look first. He stepped back quickly as footsteps approached, resuming his impassive stance. But Aria held on to his words like a lifeline, knowing somewhere out there Dante was coming for her. Unaware he was rushing straight into an elaborate trap designed to be his downfall. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across the concrete room as Carlo Vitale adjusted the camera equipment with methodical precision. Aria's wrists burned against the restraints, but she kept her expression neutral, refusing to show fear. The makeshift studio had been arranged for maximum dramatic effect. Her chair positioned center frame, lights positioned to highlight her bruised face. The feed will go live to every major family in New York, Carlo explained, almost cheerful in his cruelty. Your death will be quite the social event. Heavy footsteps echoed down the corridor. Luciano Vitale entered, his expensive suit pristine despite the underground setting. But it was the figure behind him that made Aria's blood run cold. One of Dante's captains, the same man who had opposed her at the cabin, now standing comfortably among her captors. Everything is prepared upstairs, the captain reported, avoiding Aria's accusing stare. The betrayal confirmed her worst fears about Dante's organization turning against him. Outside the compound's walls, Dante moved like a shadow through the darkness, leading a small team of his most trusted men. His face was carved from stone as he studied the building's layout one final time. Years of gathering intelligence on the Vitale operation had given him intimate knowledge of every entrance, every blind spot in their security. Primary objective is extraction, he reminded his team in hushed tones. The other strikes will divide their attention. We move fast, we move quiet, and we get her out at any cost. Inside, Luciano took his position before the cameras as midnight approached. My fellow businessmen, he began smoothly, addressing the criminal elite who would be watching. Tonight, we demonstrate the price of interference in Vitale family matters. Arya caught subtle shifts in the compound's rhythm. Guards adjusting positions, radio chatter increasing in frequency. Something was happening beyond the camera's frame. When Luciano turned the spotlight on her, Arya projected her voice clearly. Let me tell you about the experimental program that murdered my sister. About Dr. Matthews in Ward C administering unauthorized treatments. About Sarah Chen in room 204, who died of complications that were actually organ failure. She continued listing names and details, watching Carlo's face contort with rage at each revelation. Every word was another moment bought, another piece of testimony recorded. The overhead lights flickered, once, twice. Luciano frowned at the interruption, but Arya recognized the sign. Dante had reached the electrical systems. The first explosion rocked the compound with unexpected force. Then another, and another, far more firepower than Dante's small team should have possessed. Guards scrambled for positions as alarms blared. In the chaos, the traitorous captain sprang into action. His first shot took Carlo in the shoulder, spinning the younger Vitale to the ground. His second bullet destroyed the camera equipment as he reached for Arya's restraints. Dante planned this for weeks, he explained, freeing her quickly. Fed them false intel through me while building a real assault force. Now move, northeast corridor. They ran through smoke-filled hallways, gunfire echoing from multiple directions. The captain led with his weapon ready, checking corners before advancing. They had almost reached their target exit when a figure emerged from the haze. Luciano Vitale, clutching his bleeding arm but still gripping a pistol. Predictable, the patriarch spat. Like rats in a maze, running exactly where we wanted. He raised his weapon with a steady hand. A shadow detached itself from the darkness behind him. Dante materialized like an avenging angel, his expression promising death. The confrontation was brutally efficient, a swift, disarming move, a precision strike, and Luciano Vitale fell to his knees. Your empire for your life, Dante stated coldly, producing documents from his jacket. Sign everything over to me, territories, operations, all of it, or die here. Luciano's laugh was bitter but calculating. Love has made you weak, Salvatore, offering mercy for a woman. He reached for the papers with his good hand, but Arya caught the subtle movement toward his ankle holster. Gun! She shouted. The warning triggered an explosive response. Hidden Salvatore soldiers shed their Vitale guard disguises. Multiple breach points burst inward simultaneously, and the full scope of Dante's master strategy unfolded like a lethal choreography. Dante pulled Arya against him, shielding her body with his own as his organization executed their orders with precise fury. I never stopped searching, he whispered fiercely into her hair. I would have burned everything to find you. Dawn painted the Hudson River in shades of pink and gold as Dante's car wound its way along the secluded riverside road. Arya watched the water through heavy eyes, her body aching from the night's ordeal. Beside her, Dante's knuckles were white on the steering wheel, tension still radiating from his powerful frame despite their victory. The safe house emerged from morning mist, a modernist structure of glass and stone perched above the river. Security measures were subtly integrated into the design. Cameras disguised as architectural features, reinforced windows that looked deceptively delicate, strategic sightlines that allowed no approach without detection. Marco's widow, Elena, met them at the door. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but her spine was straight as she reported Sophia's status. She's sleeping upstairs. I told her you were coming home today. She hesitated before adding, I'm sorry about Marco. He lost his way, but I never will. Dante squeezed her shoulder as they passed. I know, Elena. Your family. Upstairs, they found Sophia curled around her favorite stuffed rabbit, peaceful in sleep. Dante brushed a gentle kiss across her forehead before quietly closing the door. The tenderness of the gesture made Arya's heart ache. In the kitchen, Elena had left coffee brewing and fresh pastries. The domesticity felt surreal after the violence they'd just survived. Arya's hands shook slightly as she poured 2 cups, the events of the past 24 hours crashing over her in waves. "We need to talk," Dante said quietly, leading her to the living room, where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the river. Morning light streamed across his face, highlighting the cuts and bruises from the fight. He looked exhausted, but somehow more human than she'd ever seen him. "The conversation you overheard," he began, "about continuing the research. It wasn't real." He ran a hand through his dark hair. "I knew there was a leak in my organization, someone feeding information to the Vitales. I needed to flush them out." Arya sank onto the leather sofa, coffee forgotten. "The research plans were bait? I planted different pieces of false information with different captains. The research continuation story was one version. When the Vitales seemed to know about that specific plan, it helped identify who couldn't be trusted." His jaw tightened. "I never intended to use those treatments. Everything gets destroyed once we're sure all the responsible parties have been dealt with." "Oh!" The word came out small as the implications hit her. She'd run straight into enemy hands based on a misunderstanding. "I almost got us both killed because I didn't trust you." Dante moved to sit beside her, close but not touching. "Your suspicion was reasonable. I'm not a good man, Arya. The things I've done." He trailed off, staring at his hands. "But I would never continue something that killed your sister. That killed my sister. I should have talked to you instead of running. And I should have told you about the plan to expose the traitors." He finally reached for her hand, his touch gentle. "We both have trust issues to work through." Tears pricked at Arya's eyes as weeks of fear, anger, and confusion crashed through her, emotional walls. "I was so scared when I thought you might be like them, that everything between us was a lie." "None of it was a lie." Dante's voice was rough with emotion. "You're free to go now. The Vitales can't hurt you anymore. But losing you would—" He swallowed hard. "It would break something in me I couldn't fix." Arya turned to face him fully, reading the vulnerability in his dark eyes. This was Dante stripped bare, not the Mafia boss, not the ruthless protector, just a man asking her to stay. The next week passed in a blur of activity as Dante restructured his organization. Those who had proven disloyal were eliminated or exiled. Those who stood firm were rewarded with increased responsibility and trust. Through it all, Arya watched him balance necessary brutality with surprising mercy. She threw herself into helping identify victims of the experimental program, using her perfect memory to create lists of names and dates. Anonymous donations appeared in the accounts of medical support organizations and victims' families. Federal authorities received mysterious tips about pharmaceutical company involvement, ensuring justice reached beyond the criminal underground. Mornings found her helping Sophia with homework, the child's resilience teaching her own heart to heal. They bonded over shared losses, finding comfort in building something new from the ashes of tragedy. Sophia's nightmares decreased as stability returned to her world. Evenings belonged to Dante. They would sit in his study, reviewing reports and planning next steps. He never pressured her to stay, but his eyes followed her movements like a man memorizing something precious. Each night, she chose to remain. The river house became home gradually, then all at once. Arya's few possessions migrated from drawer to drawer. Her favorite tea appeared in the kitchen. Sophia started calling her for bedtime stories as often as she called Dante. One morning, Arya stood at the window watching the sunrise paint the river gold. Behind her, she heard Sophia's laughter as Dante chased her down the hall. Elena's voice called them for breakfast, warm with affection. The scene felt right in a way she couldn't explain. This patchwork family built from broken pieces, stronger for having been remade. The autumn breeze carried the scent of saltwater and night-blooming jasmine as Dante's Bentley glided to a stop at the abandoned warehouse dock. Where concrete and rust had dominated 6 months ago, a private garden now bloomed with carefully curated flowers and elegant lighting. Stone pathways wound between ornamental trees, strung with thousands of tiny lights, transforming the once desolate spot into something magical. Dante's hands tightened on the steering wheel for a moment, memories of that rainy night washing over him. The blood on his knuckles, the gun on the console, and the desperate voice from his back seat that had changed everything. He stepped out, his tailored suit immaculate as always, but his usual predatory grace softened by anticipation. Moving to the passenger side, he opened the door for Arya with a gentleness that still surprised his associates. The gesture represented hundreds of small changes in their relationship, from captive to equal, from suspicion to trust, from fear to love. Arya emerged in a midnight blue dress that caught the starlight, her dark hair falling in soft waves. The woman who had once hidden beneath a hospital custodian's uniform now carried herself with quiet confidence, secure in both her place beside him and her own strength. "Why are we here?" she asked, taking in the transformed setting with wonder. Her fingers intertwined with his naturally now, no hesitation in accepting his touch. Dante led her along the illuminated path toward an elegant gazebo overlooking the water. Inside, candles flickered in hurricane glasses, casting warm light across polished wood. The Manhattan skyline provided a glittering backdrop, while the river below reflected the stars. "Because this is where our story began," he answered, turning to face her. His dark eyes held an intensity that made her breath catch. "That night, you commanded a man who feared nothing to be quiet. You challenged me when no one else dared." He took both her hands in his, thumbs brushing over her knuckles. The tenderness of the gesture contrasted sharply with the calluses earned from years of violence. "You saw the monster everyone fears, and eventually found something worth loving." Arya's heart thundered as Dante lowered himself to one knee before her. The sight of him, the feared Mafia boss, the ruthless protector, the man who commanded an empire through power and fear, kneeling as if in supplication, struck her deeply. "I spent my life taking what I wanted without asking," he continued, his voice rough with emotion. "But this, you, is the one thing I'll only accept if freely given." The small velvet box he produced held a stunning diamond ring, but Arya's eyes remained locked on his face, reading the vulnerability there that he showed to no one else. "Arya Costello, will you build a future with me, however complicated, however dangerous the world around us might be?" Tears spilled onto her cheeks as she pulled him to his feet, unwilling to see him kneeling for a moment longer. "I already chose you when I could have run," she reminded him softly, thinking of that night in the compound when she'd finally understood the depth of his protection. "I choose you now, knowing exactly who you are." Her hands trembled slightly as he slid the ring onto her finger. Not from fear this time, but from the weight of the moment. The diamond caught the candlelight, sending prismatic reflections dancing across the gazebo's walls. Dante pulled her into his embrace, his whispered, "Mine, forever," against her lips, carrying both possession and tenderness. It was the promise of a dangerous man who had found redemption through love, and a woman who had discovered that sometimes safety lies in the arms of the very danger you once feared. The ring felt right on her finger, like the final piece of a puzzle clicking into place. It represented not just their love, but their shared understanding of the complex world they inhabited, a world where danger and beauty coexisted, where protection came with a price, and where love could bloom in the most unexpected places. Standing in his arms, Arya thought of how far they'd come from that first terrifying encounter. She remembered the cold press of his gun against her head, the harsh demands for information, the fear that had coursed through her veins. Now those same hands that had once threatened her life touched her with infinite care, and the voice that had promised death now whispered words of eternal devotion. The transformation of the warehouse dock mirrored their own journey, from a place of darkness and danger to one of beauty and promise. Yet beneath the soft lights and flowers, they both knew the underlying strength remained. Like the concrete foundation supporting the garden, their relationship was built on a complex mixture of power and tenderness, protection and trust, danger and love. The Manhattan skyline continued to glitter behind them, a reminder of the city that had brought them together, its darkness and light, its dangers and opportunities, its capacity for both violence and redemption. The same river that had witnessed their first encounter now reflected their joined reflection. Two figures merged into one silhouette against the starlit sky,